Well, of course I can. But before I mention the name of a person that we do know who existed, or at least a person who had an office that existed prior to your Genesis story, let me first educate you on the history of your book, Genesis. Now, you have many scholars who will give the authorship of the book of Genesis to Moses. If that being true, then that would mean that it was written in and around 1400 BCE. Okay, so first you have to establish that the Genesis story was not written any time earlier of 1400 BCE. Now, the book of Genesis wasn't complete of all its editing and redacting until around 400 BCE. So therefore, the mentionings of any names in Genesis who would have existed prior to 1400 BCE will all just be names that people just gave to a story, a mythological story of their creation, of their tribe, of how it came about. And that's all Genesis is. Genesis is just telling you where the Israelite people came from. It's not really telling you the whole world. This is what the Israelites believed, of where they came from and how the world started and who created the world and so on and so forth. But at earliest it could have been written was 1400 BCE. As early as it could have been told was 1400 BCE. So therefore, when you ask the question of any notable people who are mentioned prior to the Adam and Eve, then before Adam and Eve were ever mentioned, we have documentation of contracts of kingship that was written by, let's go with Sargon, the first creator of an empire, a recognized empire in the world, even though it wasn't the first empire, but the first recognized empire of the world was Sargon the Great. Sargon existed in and around the time frame of 2300 BCE. That means that Sargon's name was mentioned in archaeological data as far as contracts and things of that nature in as early as 2300 BCE, which would put it before the Genesis story was ever told or created. Who else do we have? The oldest named person that we have is Kashim. Kashim comes from the city of Uruk, and it dates around about 3400 BCE. That means that he was in existence, or the person who held that office, and that office may have been an office called a Kashim, existed around 3400 BCE, and it talks about contracts of how much barley was kept in a place, or how many animals a person had, and exchanges of goods and things of that nature. And this is in the Uritic literature, so you can find this on stone tablets, so that means that they have not been changed at all since their original writing. And so this person, Kashim, if it was a person or an office that was held by a person, is the oldest name. Now, there are a couple of names that were mentioned around through two to 300 years later, which is the name Galsal, and the mention of Galsal and his wife and his two slaves, and their names were also mentioned. And this would have been around the 3200, 3000 BCE time frame, which would still put it prior to your Adam and Eve ever being mentioned, ever been told as a story. But even if we look at the Sumerian text, which is older, which still dates around to the Akkadian time frame, in around that 24th, 25th century BCE, we have the name of Adapa and Titi. We have Enlil and Enki. We have named individuals who possibly could have existed based on their creation story. So if you're going to say that Adam and Eve were the first people on the planet based on the writings of Genesis, then you would have to accept that based on the writings of the Sumerians and the Akkadians, that Adapa and Titi existed, Enlil, Enki existed, Ninharsag, Ishtar, Enlil, Anu, all of them also existed, because those names are mentioned before your Genesis story was ever written or ever even told. So therefore, to say that Adam and Eve, no, there were other notable people. And I didn't even go into Hammurabi. I didn't even go into the Sumerian kings list or the Kemetic kings list that mentioned people that existed prior to 1400. So therefore, sir, your story, your idea, your thought process doesn't match up. So y'all have a great day. And remember always, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.